the story before about me going up to Texas Tech. I grew up in Houston, went to Tech for college, about 12 hours away. I viewed it as kind of a fresh start and said, okay, you know what, this is an opportunity for me to be a little more extroverted because in high school, middle school, I was a homebody. I stayed at home all the time, played video games, hung out with my neighbor. Like, there's probably about a 5-minute radius in which I traveled, right? Like, I didn't go around town. And I grew up in the suburbs of Houston, not downtown Houston. So in the suburbs, I mean, there was a ton of stuff to do real close by, but I was content to stay at home, play video games, hang out with my neighbor, jump on the trampoline, play basketball, you know, in the ridiculous humidity that's there too. So, but lots of fun. But going up to Tech, decided, okay, not too many of the crowd I hung out with during school hours went up there. A couple of them did, and so I started hanging out with them to start with. But again, I'm thinking, okay, this is a chance to kind of reinvent myself, if you will. And so start going to the Welcome Week events and meet this girl that says, hey, I want you to come with me to this Campus Crusade for Christ meeting. Oh, it gets better, because I have no idea what that means. I didn't grow up in church. We had Bibles in the house. We maybe, said a few prayers during dinner, but it wasn't as important in my life then as it is now, right? The extent of my relationship with God, I didn't have one, but would be, hey, God, if you do this for me, I will do this for you. Like, I'll be good this week. I'll eat all my dinner, or I'll treat my brother nice, or whatever. Not well at all. Broke every one of them, I'm pretty sure. Broke every one of my end of the bargains. It's a good thing God didn't establish a covenant with me during high school, because it would have had to have been one-sided. It would have had to have been one-sided, much like our covenant of grace is now. So anyway, yeah, that relationship was not good, not healthy. And so eventually I get to college, and again, she says, come hang out with me at this Campus Crusade for Christ meeting. I had never heard of this organization. For whatever reason, the image stuck in my head is a bunch of people like marching bands carrying this giant banner and just doing this, chanting weird things all around campus. And for some reason I said, yeah, sure, that sounds like a fun idea. Well, I was a 19-year-old who never had a girlfriend before. There was a girl that expressed interest in hanging out. I was going to take her up on it. Even she said, hey, you want to go swing over boiling hot lava? Sure. So go with her to this meeting. It ends up looking a lot like this does now. We're sitting and talking, some worship music, et cetera. And I was like, oh, this is different. This kind of feels like a church type thing. And so, a week goes by, and I go back to the second meeting, and she's kind of out of the picture at this point. Like I said, she's out of the picture at this point. But I'm going back there, and I'm like, okay, at first I was going to try and talk to her, but then I started wanting to talk to these other guys that I talked to the first week. And for whatever reason, I found myself gravitating towards them and saying, okay, I want to hang around you guys more. I want to be around you guys more. And so weeks go by, and I'm constantly like, man, I can't wait for Thursday night. Can't wait to go hang out with them. I can't wait to spend time with them. And at this point, I'm hearing the message, but I'm not a Christian yet. I still think I am, because I remember when I became a Christian that night, the guy who shared the gospel with me was like, so how long have you been a Christian? All my life. I grew up in America, in Texas. I'm a Christian. Right? Like, that was my mentality. And then he explained to me I needed to place my faith in Jesus, that I wasn't born into it just because of where I was born, when I was born, etc. But I kept hanging out with these guys, and more with them, and less with the 2 or 3 guys that came from my high school, because there was something different about this community over here. There was more purpose, more joy. It was a lot more fun. And so I gravitated more towards this group of Christians over here than this group of people. I think one of them was a Christian, but it was very minimal in his life. The things they wanted to do just didn't appeal to me. Again, as much as I wanted to reinvent myself, there were things I was like, that still doesn't sound like fun. And so I start hanging out more and more with these Christians, and like I said, eventually one of them leads me to Christ, and I think back on that, and I think back of the 4.5 years that followed, and I'm like, there's no way I would have survived college without that community. Just because of all the unique challenges college brings. I mean, 12 hours away from home. Probably not. I could elaborate on that, but I'm going to choose not to. No. It's God knew what he was doing to get me to Emily. Let's leave it that way. Oh, you want to know? Here's the irony of this. The reason I went to Tech in the first place was a girl. Yeah, 12 hours away. I'm going to chase her. Literally, before I even got foot on Texas Tech campus, I was like, yeah, this ain't going to work out. Again, God orchestrated all this. He knew just what to nudge me in the right direction and lead me down the path he was going to lead me, and then he just pulled the rug out like, I'm not letting you go down this too much more. He knew it was probably dangerous. Again, I got to the right spot where Emily was there, and I was like, I'm not pursuing any more girls. I'm done. Wait until after I graduate, and then Emily comes in the picture, and I think I said that like 3 times to God, and then right afterwards, this one was obviously Emily was the one that worked out. God knew what he was doing, preparing me for just that right moment to be able to handle a relationship. So absolutely love the fact that all those things led to Emily, for sure. Highlight of college right there, outside of placing my faith in Jesus, obviously. But it is all the little things, and it's the community that's there, and the little things they do, like inviting you to game nights and stuff. Which is why we've been talking about individual identity a lot this semester, and so now one of the things I want us to make sure we don't do is miss out on the corporate side of that, the communal identity, if you will, because when Jesus saves us, when we place our faith in him, he doesn't just say, okay, now go and do life on your own, right? Have you ever thought about why he gave us the church? Not from the church's purpose towards unbelievers, because we'll talk about that, but we talk about that a lot in terms of our witness and our reaching out to others. But have you ever thought about why God gave the church to believers? Like what the benefit is for believers. And it's an interesting one. Because, a lot of times we feel like we got to do life on our own. I still remember several years ago a parent, I was talking to them just about life in general, and I think we were talking about flocks or something, and I was saying like, hey, are y'all going to sign up for one? And I remember them distinctly saying something to the extent of, I've got enough friends. At this point in life, I just need me, my family, we're good. And as someone who's prone to go down that path a little bit if I'm not careful, if I'm not intentional about saying, no, I need community, I understand that now, but at the same time I go, that's not healthy. And I think the pandemic, especially having to stay home for those few months, taught us that, because I remember coming back up here during the Good Friday service where John asked me to preach, and I remember walking in the door, and it had been the first time in maybe a month and a half that I'd seen John, Travis, a couple of the elders, and I just remember having to almost catch myself, because I kind of felt a little overwhelmed at that moment, going I missed this community of believers. And as time went on and more of us came back, one of the things I think realized, one of the most common phrases that occurred was, oh, it's so good to be back. As people walked in the door and they saw familiar faces for the first time in months, that there was a definite sigh of relief for many of them of I needed this. And I'm not going to name the person because I didn't get their permission, but I still, there's one family in particular that comes to mind that every time I see the dad, every time I talk with him, it's just, he's so happy and relieved to have conversation with someone that he hasn't seen in a long time. There was just, I think we ended up taking for granted so much of what we experience here, so much of this community. And so we don't want to understate that. We don't want to miss that and feel like, oh man, I'm gonna miss out. So we don't want to take it for granted. And so when it comes to why God gave Christians the church, I want us to go ahead and turn to Acts chapter 2. In Acts chapter 2, we've got the formation of the church. Okay, I see Bibles sitting in laps and no one's turning. That's weird to me. Go ahead and look at Acts chapter 2. Because the benefit of doing this is you get used to turning to different books of the Bible. The benefit of opening it up and looking at it goes, oh, I see this context, right? And if you look at Acts chapter 2 and you look at some of the context around verse 42, what we end up seeing here is the church being established, right? Jesus has been resurrected. He's died, resurrected. He's already ascended at this point in Acts chapter 2. And now the disciples are waiting. The Holy Spirit comes down, speaking in tongues. People come to know Jesus. If you look at the context, I believe in the verse right before, in verse 41, it says 3,000 people were added to the church in one day. Like, I want you to picture that. Church being established, built up, Peter sharing the gospel, and 3,000 people place their faith in Jesus. 3,000. That's like 10 times as many people come here on a Sunday morning. 10 times as many people. Instant mega church. But probably in a very healthy way, I'd imagine, right now, because I want you to imagine 3,000 people, what verse 42 looks like. 3,000 people. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and the fellowship. And the way the verse is written, fellowship is defined as the breaking of bread and prayers. So there's two big ideas there. Devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and fellowship. 3,000 people doing that. Devoting themselves to the apostles' teaching and fellowship. Eating meals together, praying together. So fellowship it's a unique word that deals with the community, but it's what we have in common, right? So when we talk about fellowship, it's community that's centered upon our foundation of Jesus saving us, right? So when we come together for life groups, it's fellowship. When we come together and just play video games and don't talk about God whatsoever and don't let God influence what we do, which we shouldn't be doing that, but in terms of like God should influence everything we do, but when we don't, like that's not fellowship, right? When God takes a back seat and isn't the focus of our getting together, that's not fellowship. That's just hanging out in community. Nothing wrong with that, but I want us to kind of understand a little bit of what fellowship is, because that's a large part of what makes Christian community different, right? I think each one of us has a desire to at least have some community, some fellowship. And I say that as someone who's naturally a little more introverted, and like I recharge more when I'm by myself, whereas opposed to an extrovert would recharge by being around people. Like that's what gets them energized and going. Not necessarily outgoing, but an extrovert is energized by being around people. An introvert is energized recharging alone. Right? And so we all need community to an extent, some of us way more than others. But what makes Christian community so unique, so different? Like I said, when I got to tech, I gravitated towards these Christians for a reason and not so much these other people who were still doing activities and stuff. But that didn't strike me as fun. This over here did. And it was in large part when you start talking about what makes Christian community different. What makes it different? A big part of it is the foundation of Jesus, which leads to, and this is the part I want to emphasize, unconditional belonging, or at least it should. Right? One of the reasons the church attracts people, one of the reasons we as believers are drawn to it, as well as unbelievers. But as believers, we're more aware of our sin, I'd like to think, because we've placed our faith in Jesus. We know we need to be saved. And so when it comes to the church, we're hoping and praying that the church lives out what it's supposed to do, and that's unconditionally accept people and love people. It's the idea that we should mirror our acceptance before God, that Jesus was known as a friend of sinners. Are we? Do we welcome people in? Because I feel like most oftentimes, and I say this as Christianity in general before we get down to talking about specifics here, Christianity in general, we tend to like put barriers up intentionally, but not like thinking through like, oh, I really want to make sure this Christian right here doesn't get welcomed in. But we intentionally at the same time go, I don't like that person. I don't like that person. And so we put up all these barriers, and we don't reflect Jesus when we do that. You know, I think John's sermon from last week, I think, hits the nail on the head. And I think that speaks to some of the specific things here in terms of passive aggressiveness. Because I remember being a teenager. I remember hating conflict a lot more than I do it now as an adult. Still don't love conflict, but I understand we have to deal with it. As a teenager, I'm like, I'm not dealing with conflict. I'm going to run the other way. right? And so I remember being passive aggressive a majority of the time, which is why when I heard John's sermon last week, if you don't remember it, if you weren't listening, if you weren't here, definitely worth a listen, because we are prone to being passive aggressive, and we have got to be careful with that. I have seen some people here, and I'm not even going to say if they're in this room or not, but I have seen some teenagers here literally make eye contact with someone who walks in the room and just turn and walk out. And every time I see that, I think, I really hope that other person just happened not to look at you. Because like you're deliberately choosing to say, I want this person, I want them to know that I'm mad at them, because I'm going to make eye contact, I'm going to look at them, and then I'm going to turn and I'm going to walk out. That is passive aggressiveness to a T. Passive aggressiveness to a T, and I've seen us struggle with that. I think we struggle with passive aggressiveness in general, but I think that's also being your age in general. Because I hope no one likes conflict at any age. People that like conflict, I get a little nervous around. But as a teenager, our brains, I remember thinking much further down the road, like, I would do anything and everything. There's a grasshopper crawling on the stage right there. Squirrel. I'm like completely distracted. I see something crawling over here out of the middle of my eye, and I was like, that kind of looks like a wasp. Oh, no, that's a cricket. I didn't know you were kicking. I thought you were just like spontaneously moving around. Anyway, I got distracted. Let's get back on topic. Oh, that was totally on me. 100% on me. Don't crush it. Don't throw it at anybody either. We don't need screams and shrieks. Yeah. Get it later. Get it later. Get it later. Get it later. It's right there, but get it later. All right. Bringing it back. Bringing it back. Anyway. Sorry, guys. Here's the thing. Do you belong here? The answer should always be yes. Right? The answer should always be yes. We need to start believing the best in people and not the worst. We need to have a community where we can come and not worry about what others are going to think of us. Right? And so all too often we come and we put on a mask, and we'll talk about that later when we talk about bearing one another's burdens, but we come and we try to hide behind a smile, and we're just afraid of what others are going to think. And I guess we'll go ahead and just jump around a little bit, and we're going to go ahead and talk about bearing one another's burdens. So, Katie, don't go in order of the slides. It's going to be at the very end, Galatians 6:2. I don't think they all realized you were here because they just got excited. I need to see a lot more maturity before we have a lock-in. The conversation we had to have during the announcements begs otherwise. I know, the bar just gets farther and further away. Galatians 6:2 says to bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the love of Christ. Look, when it comes to being accepted, when it comes to belonging here, every one of us in this room is walking in the door with struggles and insecurities and burdens. And we put on a mask and we try to hide what's going on. Now, I'm not saying walk in here and just vomit everything that's happening in your life onto every single person you walk into and have a 30-minute conversation with everyone. But find a couple people, talk to us leaders about what's going on. Because the Christian life is not meant to be lived alone. When you try to go it alone, when you try to live it alone, you're going to end up stressed out, frustrated, anxious, nervous. And you're going to have all of this stuff just bottled up inside that eventually is going to spill out in one way or another. Look, there is no question you can ask here. There is no statement you can make that's going to make us turn and go, oh no, we can't deal with this. You can't talk about this here. No. This is a place where you belong and you can talk about anything that's going on in your life. I need you to understand that. Don't feel like you have to put on a mask when you walk in the door. Don't plaster a fake smile on your face and never have a real conversation with anyone over the course of 6 or 7 years. Develop relationships so that you can talk to people about things. And I will stress it until Jesus comes back. You can talk to us leaders about anything. You're not going to scare us away. When you just raised your eyebrows like you're testing me. I'm not going to name your name. When you just raised your eyebrows, I saw it. Like, it's like you're thinking, I'm going to find the one thing he can't. No, we will talk about whatever you want to talk about. Bring it. See, the Christian community is different than normal community because, we have unconditional acceptance before God, and that should be mirrored in here. Unconditional acceptance. Nothing can separate you from the love of God. And man, I'll tell you, nothing is going to be able to separate you from us. Nothing is going to be able to separate our love for you. You can't make us not love you. I want you to understand that. Nothing you say or do is going to make us go, I don't love that one. I want that one gone. We are always going to be praying for you, always caring for you. So with that in mind, to kind of switch gears a little bit before we get too late into going into second service, we're going to try something a little different today. Y'all remember last summer when we were on Zoom a lot and we played Jackbox games? And we're going to do it right now. So obviously only 4 of you, because we only have room for 4, so y'all can compete for who can get into the room the fastest as I walk back here and talk Katie through how to set it up. Sit. Because we're going to demonstrate something here. Okay, so you can go ahead and scroll. You can just scroll up. No, don't worry about that. Scroll up. Yeah. So turn volume control up so we actually have volume. You just click. All right. Hit close. And we're playing Bomb Court. The grind. I can't control necessarily. The family-friendly filter only works for so long. Well, there you go. Jackbox.tv on your smartphone. How fast can you get in there? And then the 4 of you might want to get in one spot here on the floor because you're going to have to each one of you is going to have a code. The way this game works is you're each going to have a set of instructions like cut the yellow wire unless it's an odd number or something like that. And so we want to make sure. Yeah, they played this game over Zoom. It's not working. APDU. That's weird. Ashley's in. Hit refresh and try it again. The boys. Nathan. We got room for one more. Y'all can come sit up here on this front row. Is that working? We got room for one more. Got room for one more. And then they'll press start once they're ready. So right now you're good. All right. When y'all, I think it's Ashley, you're going to be able to hit start. Okay. Y'all are going to want to be close together because you're going to have to talk through this. Each one of you is going to have a different instruction.
It's all bombs all the way down. Defuse them until you explode. I'll just stand here and watch.
Y'all gotta read your instructions together. I love this. Each one of y'all has a different set of instructions. So like, this is why you gotta read the instructions.
That's why you gotta stick together.
Yeah.
Two of you are.
I don't hear any communication. All right, we're gonna go one more time. One more time. We got one more time.
The boys.
I.e. Nathan.
The one with the phone.
They got it from here. Leader of the boys. See if y'all can get more than 4. Now, some of you might have contradictory information, so make sure you read them all before you cut. One of you might say, cut the first wire if it's odd. There you go. All right, well, we're going to call it quits for now. We're going to call it quits for now. Point has been demonstrated. We can maybe play later. Okay, so right. Complicated this week. I love it. All right, y'all take a seat. So the reason I had us play that game is because I think it's a perfect illustration of community. Because when it comes to community, how many of you have ever had a question about the Bible? Right? Exactly. Most hands should be up right now. When it comes to community, and we start talking about living in community, when it comes to questions about the Bible, it's dangerous to go it alone, right? You might be, it can be like trying to solve that bomb in Bomb Corp and going, okay, well, this is what I think it says, but then someone over here might have an additional piece of information that you need, right? Every one of us brings something to the table, and we have to trust each other and open up to one another. Matthew 28:19 through 20, and talking about discipleship and spiritual growth, this is the other big component of Acts 2:42, where they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and fellowship. The idea of teaching in Matthew 28:19 through 20, go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I've commanded you. And behold, I'm with you always to the end of the age. Couldn't do this without Jesus being with us. We need him to be with us. But as we're going to make disciples, this is what teaching entails. And when it comes to having questions about the Bible, I'll tell you, I have seen it time and time again that it is dangerous when someone goes, I'm just going to go to YouTube. I'm just going to go Google it on the internet. Because you have no sounding board. The only sounding board you have is someone who, and I hate to say it, but we're attracted to this type of personality. Someone goes, well, you know what? I found something no one's ever seen before. I have a completely unique take on something. That's a red flag right there. When someone says, you've never seen this before. You lose a little bit of credibility when you say something like that, to be honest, in my eyes. because that is pride and arrogance. And that's what we end up leaning into when we go Google things, was we find people who said, I studied on my own, I didn't look at anything else, or I've come to this conclusion, and we end up down this rabbit hole of going, how does no one else see this? It makes perfect sense, because the person is very persuasive. I'm not saying don't go on Google and YouTube, but don't make that your primary source of how you get your information. This is why we need Christian community, because we have to be able to bounce these ideas off one another and say, hey, I read this the other day, saw this the other day, heard this the other day. What do you think? And we have Christian community guided by the Spirit to be able to say, I don't know about that. Or, well, let's see what this passage has to say on it. Hebrews 10:24 says, let us consider how to stir one another up to love and good works. Not only is there danger in going it solo for our knowledge, but we want to stir one another up. We want to spur one another onward and say, hey, great job loving that person. Love to see more of that. Like, man, that was really encouraging to see. And then you get to hear stories about someone who came in the community, joined up, linked arms with Christians, became a Christian, and grows in their faith. Right? We've got a few of those kind of stories here. At the end of the day, we have to embrace our communal identity as one body under Christ. That Christ being the cornerstone, and we've been talking about this in small groups in Ephesians, how God has united Gentiles and Jews. And it's been a mystery up until Jesus' death, resurrection, establishment of the church. And so it's amazing to see that God can do that. Because here's the thing, when it comes to our relationships with one another, rather than hold grudges and not spur one another onward, not talk about the Bible with each other, God has made a way so that the most important relationship could be repaired, right? Ours and his. There should be no relational wound that is unrepairable in our lives. There should be no relational wound that is unrepairable in our lives, because God himself has fixed the biggest one, ours and his. Not saying we're going to get along with everybody and be best friends with everybody. What I'm saying is we are able to live at peace with everybody and have some really amazing friendships along the way because of what God has done for us. So right now, I want you all to break into small groups for a couple minutes. And it's going to be real simple today. And then when you're done, you guys will be dismissed. So I'm going to pray us out, but then I want you to go to the tables and answer the question that's up here. And then when you're done answering that question, you guys are done. But everyone has to be done at the table before you can leave, obviously. So, question would be 2 things you like to do that others might know, and 1 thing you like to do that they might not know. Yes, Monty. Open up with one another. We love you and delight in you. Keep working in us. In Jesus' name, amen.